Hare Krishna.
Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna Maharaj. Vishnu.
Vishnu Prabhu. Yes.
Hare Krishna.
No, I was just asking, I just, Rajarshi Prabhu, just to give a couple minutes of what they experienced on that day of the installation of the deity.
Okay, so
How about you?
what Rajarshi Prabhu actually said was the fact that we also had at that time our Adikeshava Prabhu, who was then previously Adikeshava Swami. He also came and was leading us into nice kirtan. Also, we had one Mataji who came from New Zealand, Gunavarti Lady Dasi. She actually came and she was doing all the deity outfits. She came a couple of months before, and she saw all the outfits for the deities. And we had a very grand program. I remember we had to rent a couple of the government buses in order to bring people to attend the program, because the entire yard of the temple compound was all soggy with mud. You know, it wasn't paved, and so we didn't have the temple room doors up as yet. But because we set the specific date that for the deities, at that year it was on the 13th and 14th of February, on the Valentine Day. So the day before, when Srila Prabhupada was installed, unfortunately I wasn't here, because during that period a lot of the devotees were still going out there and trying to raise Lakshmi. And I remember myself and one Devanandas, the devotees, they forgot us in San Fernando and they left us out. So they came for us very late. When we came, Srila Prabhupada was already installed. And the next day we had a very grand program. We had also one of your godbrothers from Bombay, Haridas. He was doing filming, and so he came to Trinidad here and we was doing filming for the program. And we had one man by the name of Pradeep Shankar. He was an ambassador from India teaching dancing and music and so in Trinidad. He brought his crew over here also, and we had a very grand cultural program. One thing I want to mention though, and today just reflected in my mind, and I wanted to mention that, I said if I get the opportunity, is that I remember a couple of months before, when Srila Prabhupada, the deity was bought, his murti was bought at the temple at St. Augustine. You had this elderly gentleman who used to visit the temple, you know, and we were coming from Sankirtan, and he met us on the pathway while we were coming from Sankirtan. And he told us, he said, Prabhu, I would like you all to know that Swamiji has come. So we were wondering who's the Swamiji he's speaking about. He said, yes, he's in a room and he's meditating right now. So we were all excited when we went. It was Srila Prabhupada Murti that was there, you know. And what I was reflecting today is only to remember, after speaking with our now temple president, Vijotama Das, that happened to be his uncle, you know. So, you know, so basically that was it, you know, with our program here. Yeah, Maharaj. Thank you.
No, thank you very much. Thank you for that's wonderful to know. Obviously I wasn't there, so it's good to have the first-hand experience. Thank you very much. Haribol. So I wanted to just read something from Srimad Bhagavatam about deity worship, and then speak a little something about the importance of the deity. So this is from the 11th canto, 27th chapter, 13, verse number 13 of Srimad Bhagavatam, Lord Krishna's instructions on the process of deity worship. So, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So I'll just read the verse, and then it's a short purport. Chancha chaleti dvividha pratishta jiva mandiram udvasa vahane nasta stirayam udavachane. Translation and purport by the servants of Srila Prabhupada. The deity form of the Lord, who is the shelter of all living entities, can be established in two ways, temporarily or permanently. But a permanent deity, having been called, can never be sent away, my dear Uddhava. Purport. The devotees of the Lord understand themselves to be the Lord's eternal servitors, recognizing the deity to be the Lord himself. They permanently install the deity and engage in perpetual worship. The impersonalists, however, regard the eternal form of the Lord as a temporary manifestation of illusion. In fact, they regard the deity form as a mere stepping stone in their ambitious program to become God. Materialistic persons of whatever stripe consider the Lord to be their order supplier, and so they make temporary arrangements for religious ceremonies to achieve temporary material sense gratification. This temporary mode of worship is favored by those desiring to exploit the personality of Godhead for their personal ends, whereas the loving devotees in Krishna consciousness eternally engage in the worship of the personality of Godhead. They install permanent deities meant to be worshipped perpetually. Om Jnana Timanandasya Gananjana Sharakaya Chakshuru Militam Yena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manopishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupakada Mahyam Darati Shvaparantikam Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Simate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pastyata Deshatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadha Shiva Shri Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So this, of course, in this purport, it is referring to temporary installation of the deity in the worst case scenario, meaning the Mayavadis. Not only do they install temporary deities, or their concept of the deity is temporary, but also in many big temples, especially in South India, the big traditional Vishnu temples, I've seen that mostly they have Mayavadis worshiping them. So this is the unfortunate situation in Kali Yuga, that people don't understand the importance of the deity. Just like in the beginning of this chapter, it's stated that worshiping the deity is the best way to achieve purity and stability in Krishna consciousness. Sometimes we see Srila Prabhupada makes a statement like, deity worship is for neophyte devotees. But that doesn't mean that worshiping the deity is only for neophytes. It means that neophytes must worship the deity. They must, either, of course, if they're not initiated, they worship the deity by participating, by offering things to the deity like some flowers or something, or contributing to the temple and to the deity worship financially, or doing something else, some service in the temple for the deity. But a devotee, for their purification, we see Sanatana Goswami had deities, Rupa Goswami had deities, Jiva Goswami had deities. They all worshiped a deity. The difference is, as Krishna instructs in this chapter, that when someone is actually a pure devotee on that level, they can worship the deity in a very different way. They can worship the deity in Raga Marg, which means, like in the case of Sanatana Goswami, he worshipped his deity, he hung his deity before the temple was built. he hung his deity from a tree, and he would offer. He was rather, you know, older, aged in that time, so he couldn't really go and procure so many items for deity worship. So he would just offer the deity uh, chapatis or something very simple without salt or spices. And of course, we know from the story that the deity complained, "Why don't you at least offer me salt?" And he said, "I have no salt, I have no money, what can I do?" And then a barge going down the Yamuna, we can just understand even 500 years ago how much bigger the Yamuna was, because they hadn't siphoned off her water for so many other things. And so, of course, he was the captain of that ship. He by his devotion, Krishna helped move that boat, and the man offered so much salt and built the temple. So the point is that in this verse, when it refers to temporary deity worship, it refers to a temporary deity like a festival deity. But even for a festival deity, it's explained that one has to uh, make the deity, meaning usually a temporary deity is a deity made from cow dung, like in Govardhan, they make many deities out of Gopal, out of cow dung to be worshipped on that day. But still, one has to do a ceremony, call the deity uh, into the temporary form, and uh, once the ceremony or event is over with, then the deity is should be otherwise one requests the Lord to return or abandon that deity form. And this why would we do this? Because to understand that the deity is Krishna, that when we make a deity, we're inviting Krishna. It's not just like many people have deities in their home, but sometimes there's not any kind of continuous service. Whereas even if you can do only one artik a day or one offering a day, it should be something consistent with the deity. Of course, one may have Sri Panchatattva. Even then, one should have a regulated program. And so this idea of installing and uninstalling a temporary deity helps us understand the deity is nothing material. The external form that we're seeing is actually uh, the recipient, where the Lord, of course, because as Srila Prabhupada explained, that because everything, aham sarvasya prabhava matra sarvam pravartate, everything, both material and spiritual, are coming from Krishna, then the matter from which the deity is crafted is also um, it's also part of Krishna. But we actually ask Krishna to come into the deity, Krishna in his personal form, just like one of the residing places for the deity is within the heart. So we invite Krishna into our hearts by Krishna Katha, by chanting the holy name, by dedicating our lives to Krishna consciousness. And as far as the permanent deity, so that's a deity. Sometimes people make a deity in the sand when they're traveling, or they make some form and a temporary form of the Lord. But in our case, and especially when we're speaking about Sri Sri Radha Gopinath, Sri Sri Gauranitai in Trinidad, we're speaking about a deity that is permanently installed. And that permanent installation, Srila Prabhupada spoke about that, the importance of it, uh, when he spoke about Archa Vigraha and Galagraha. So Archa Vigraha means that beautiful form of the Lord that uh, that someone out of meditation, because there's a way even to make deities. Of course, nowadays in Kali Yuga process, maybe you make a mold, and the person who's making the deity out of that mold may be someone in China who does not even a devotee. but the mold itself and the original form from which the mold is made should be made by someone who meditated on the Lord, and the Lord guides them in making the deity. So, so Archa Vigraha, the Lord comes in a form which is suitable to be worshipped. That's what Archa Vigraha means. And Srila Prabhupada explains, do not let the Archa Vigraha become Galagraha. And Srila Prabhupada, uh, he explained Galagraha, which means burden. Otherwise, uh, this deity, and so Prabhupada said, now this old man has left us this burden. And sometimes, because deity worship is very demanding. The reason it's demanding is that the deity appears so that we can center our lives around the service to the deity. Therefore, Srila Prabhupada in second canto, third chapter, the purport to text, I think it's 22, he describes how important the deity is in the life of a devotee. He says everyone who has a family, everyone who has a deity, should worship the deity from 4 in the morning to 10 at night. So I've made this point many times. That's more than we do in most temples. But this is actually Srila Prabhupada's uh, instruction. If we want to do deity worship properly in our home, that's how we do it. So we get up very early in the morning, you have Mangal Artik, and you have the last Artik every day. You dress the deity. And Prabhupada says there that you can have Shalagram, you can have Sitaram, you can have Gornitai, you can have Radha Krishna. But whatever deity you have, they must be worshipped properly. And everyone in the household, Prabhupada says, who is 12 years old or older should be initiated so they can worship the deity. So this is, of course, something we can't so easily follow in the present situation that we find ourselves in Krishna consciousness, in the midst of Kali Yuga, in the midst of a very, very extreme degree of sense gratification, where everyone's being encouraged to totally identify with the body, and the bodily concept of life is the only reality. As I was speaking the other day, that someone gets paid millions of dollars to kick a little ball around, and someone who's actually giving perfect knowledge uh, may not have any money at all, or even a school teacher gets paid, I don't know how much they pay in Trinidad, but let's say in US dollars, an average school teacher will get something between 25 and 40,000 US dollars a year. And that's nothing in the US nowadays. But someone who can kick a ball around or throw it or bounce it, they'll get millions and millions of dollars. That's how advanced the bodily concept of life is. So the idea of the mercy that the Lord gives us in the form of the deity is unlimited. He comes, and that deity form, he takes his original form, meaning, it may not be exactly as Krishna is, but we see his lotus eyes, his beautiful reddish bimba fruit like lips, his uh, his bluish black hair surrounding his face, just like a frame, framing his face. This is the form of the Lord that he comes, and the deity. It's not that the deity should be seen as some reverential object for all of our lives, but the deity, according to our level of devotion, will reciprocate with us. Of course, one of the most famous story of the deity reciprocation. There are many famous stories, but of course, in our sampradaya, the worship of or Madhavendra Puri, and his appearance day is coming up in I think like 10 days. So Madhavendra Puri, the deity appeared to him, actually walked up to him, and gave him some milk and told him, then later he appeared in a dream and said, "Here I am. I've been buried here. My body is very hot from all these years being buried in the brush. So please come and get me." You can imagine a deity who may speak to you like that. And then Madhavendra Puri followed his instructions, and the deity told him exactly what to do. The deity uh, received his worship, and then after some time, after they had done the abhishek and installation and everything, the deity spoke to him and said, "I still feel very hot. Please go to Jagannath Puri and bring me sandalwood." And of course, Madhavendra Puri went to such painstaking effort to go and bring that sandalwood, and returning to the Remuna, the Gopinath deity. Gopal appeared and said, "Gopinath, we're the same person. Just give the sandalwood to him." So imagine that level of reciprocation, or one of the most, not only for worship, but in the case of Shakshi Gopal. Shakshi Gopal, uh, or who's, Shakshi means witness. So he witnessed this young Brahmin, elderly Brahmin. They went to see the deity. The young Brahmin helped the elderly Brahmin. And he was so grateful. The elderly Brahmin was so grateful that he said, "You can have my daughter in marriage." And the young Brahmin, he could immediately see problems because he was much more Krishna conscious. He was much more of a devotee. So he said, "Maybe that's not such a good idea." And the old man said, "No, no, it's a good idea." So the devotee he knew, how do you make a contract? What is the best contract? Just like, nowadays, the best contract means you sign a paper in front of a notary, or you get it authenticated by a apostolate process. But a Vaishnava knows that the most binding contract is that you appear before the deity and you promise. Therefore, when we have spiritual initiation, when we have weddings, we ask, of course, weddings are not always done before the deity. Sometimes in the case of Vaishnavas and initiated devotees, they may be done. But actually, however it's done, the persons are supposed to go before the deity and solidify their promise. We give our spiritual initiation before the deity. So the deity is the ultimate, and every promise and every service that we promise to the deity is a binding contract. And as this verse that we just read from Srimad Bhagavatam says, when the deity is permanently installed, then the deity cannot be moved. You can't change it. Our minds are always changing. Our minds are chanchala, always changing, always flickering, always looking for some new object of sense gratification. But the deity cannot be seen in that way. The deity, service to the deity, just like one time in a certain country I won't mention, the devotees were very anxious to install the deity, but from my vision, I didn't see a level of commitment that warranted the installation. But they insisted. And one senior devotee said, "I will make sure that the deity worship goes on." And then 6 months later, uh, the head pujari left. Another person couldn't come anymore. Another person wasn't, because of the influence of Kali Yuga and our Kali Yuga uh, values and our Kali Yuga determination was that such as that. So I had to actually find another place to move the deities to, because the service got to be so negligent. So therefore, the great fortune of having an installed deity like Shri Radha Gopinath, Shri Gornita in Trinidad, is such a great fortune, but it only is a great fortune if we are contributing to the deity. The deity is there to receive our worship. Otherwise, as Srila Prabhupada said on many occasions, why does Krishna come to this material world? Why would Krishna come to Londonville or Houston or London? When Prabhupada was there and he was interviewed, he was asked, "Do you believe in hell?" And he said, "Yes." I said, "What is it like?" He said, "London." So, why would the deity come to hell? No, when Krishna lives in Goloka Vrindavan or Dwarka Dham or Mathura or even in this material world, Krishna is there in Vrindavan, the city where everyone practically is a devotee of the Lord. Why does he want to come to, you know, Trinidad, U.S., Venezuela, Colombia? You know, why would Krishna want to come to these places? Because just to receive our worship. That's the only reason. Otherwise, and not only does he come to receive our worship, but he takes a very special position. He takes a position of helplessness. Although he is the supreme deity and controller of that particular area, that particular temple, that particular region, uh, he's still he's the supreme person, but he takes a helpless. He becomes supposedly helpless. He's depending on us to come and cut up some little fruits, just like if we were feeding a baby, cut it up into little pieces, very nicely arranged, and we have to dress him, we have to bathe him, just like a 1-year-old. Of course, Krishna is the unlimitedly year old. There is no birth. I mean, we have Jamastami, but that's just when Krishna appears. Still, that is his mercy. And if we ever see that as a burden, as a difficulty, oh, I have to go. I've heard this so many times that I have to go worship the deity. And I always make the point. We chant Ki Baba Siyache Gora Chan, Aroti Korena Brahma. Brahma, Adi Deva Gani, Lord Brahma, assisted by a host of demigods, comes to worship Gaur-Nitya. Whenever there's Gaur Artik, Lord Brahma is there. Granted, he has the facility to be many places at one time. And granted, with his very subtle body, it's easier for him to get there. But he's very busy. He's probably busier than any of us. Sometimes running a temple can be overwhelming for us. He runs the universe. And of course, it can also be overwhelming for him, but that's why he takes Krishna's help. But he comes to worship Lord Gaura. Yamaraj came to worship Lord Gauranga. And sometimes we find it so difficult, even to come and worship the deity for one day a week or one day a month. Sometimes devotees can't keep that. So we have to understand this is Krishna. Just like it says, Abhinatvam Namanamino, there's no difference between Krishna and his name. Sometimes that's difficult to understand. We can understand it theoretically, but to understand it in practice, so that's difficult. But it shouldn't be so difficult to understand. Here is the Lord with his flute, or here's the Lord in Gaur-Nitai form, or here's the Lord in Jagannath form. He's come to accept our worship, and and when we worship him, when we really desire to worship him, then he begins to reciprocate. I gave the examples, Shakshi Gopal, the Brahmin actually requested the deity. He requested the deity, you agreed to be my witness. Now please come. And I need your help. And the deity said to him, I'm a deity. How can I walk? And Brahman said, if you can walk, you can talk. If you can talk, you can walk. So Sometimes we say, walk your talk. So he did that. Deity did that. And he came and he testified. I mean, he was just being there. Everybody could understand that this Brahmin was telling the truth. So that, what does that mean? Symbolically, apart from the real witnessing that Shakshi Gopal did, symbolically it means that when we have full faith in the deity will support everything we said. Name Bhakta Pranashati, as Krishna promises in Bhagavad Gita, that I will always be there for my devotee. I will always be present for my devotee. And I will always help them. So just like the Brahmin with Shakshi Gopal or Lord Jagannath. uh, Lord Jagannath, the father of Prataparudra, King Purushottam, you know, Purushottam Dev, he was in a war with uh, a war over the deed. Well, the war was actually over a princess because he had spoken to the king of Kanchi, and the king of Kanchi promised. Uh, he saw his king of Kanchi's daughter. He was attracted, and the king was very satisfied. Said, "Yes, I'll give my daughter." So his king sent his minister to Jagannath Puri to make the arrangements for the marriage with Purushottam Dev and his daughter. And the minister who arrived on the day before Rath Yatra. He stayed for Rath Yatra, and he saw the king sweeping the street. So he returned to Kanchi and said, "I don't think you should give your daughter. This king is no better than a street sweeper." So, otherwise, he was thinking in his mundane mind that the king is is just so poor or incapable or incompetent that he has to sweep the streets. And of course, then there was a war, and in that war, Purushottam Dev was losing. He lost practically almost everything because of natural disasters. So he was thinking, because the agreement was, if the king of Kanchi won, his deity was Ganesh, then Jagannath Baladev Subhadra would have to come to Kanchi and be put on the altar behind Ganesh. And if, of course, uh, if Purushottam Dev won the war, then the deity Ganesh would come and join Lord Jagannath. So, uh, so the king, there was a big fire. He lost part of his army. He lost so many things. He didn't know what to do. And Lord Jagannath appeared in a dream and said, "Don't worry, my king, just have faith in me." And Jagannath and Balaram, they actually took human form. Of course, Krishna, form of Krishna and Balaram, they're human forms, not their deity forms. And they went and won the battle for the king. So this is how much, and worshiping the deity is not just a question of I go there and unconsciously wave a few things, some incense and the flower and the chamara and a ghee lamp. No, if it's done with full consciousness, the deity will reciprocate. Just like King Purushottam, Prataparudra, I'm sorry, King Prataparudra, he wanted to see, he could see Lord Jagannath, but there were certain aspects of Jagannath he couldn't understand. So he wanted to have darshan of Mahaprabhu. He saw Mahaprabhu dancing in the temple, but then he was perspiring, and foam was coming from his mouth out of ecstasy, uh, liquid coming out of his nose, uh, tears shooting out from his eyes. His body was covered with foam and I don't know if it was mucus, whatever kind of liquid that was coming out of his mouth and nose, and dust. And Prataparudra was confused. And then that night, he went to sleep. Lord Jagannath appeared in his dream. And as he ran toward Lord Jagannath, Jagannath said, "No, no, no. When my body is nicely anointed with oils and jewels, then I'm very suitable for your worship." And then he transformed himself into Jagannath, but with foam, mucus, dust all over his body. He said, but when I'm like this, you're not so happy with me. And then he transformed into Lord Chaitanya. So, but the Parudra had never, he may have done an artik, but he was not a regular deity worshiper. But he got this mercy out of his devotion. So the more we dedicate ourselves to the worship of the deity, the purity in our hearts increases more and more. And because actually worshiping the deity is not just an opportunity to serve, it is one of the highest services you can possibly do. Although sometimes we consider Sankirtan to be, uh, the most intense service, uh, and it is. And if you do Sankirtan in the proper consciousness, you can make a lot of advancement very quickly. But I consider that deity worship is one of the purest services because, in the spiritual world, Sankirtan means we glorify Krishna with instruments or we chant his holy name. That we don't have to go out and distribute books and confront demons and materialistic people. But uh, worshiping the deity is what you do in Goloka Vrindavan. What is everybody doing? What do we hear in Bhagavatam? That the cowherd boys would lie Krishna down, they would massage his legs, and they would anoint his body with sandalwood pulp, and they would fan him with a chamara. And that's what we're doing. When we're worshiping the deity, one is actually practicing. This is what I'll be doing, hopefully, very soon in the spiritual world. And the more we do it, and the more sincerely we do it, and the more we actually see it. Just like one time, one devotee, I think it was Shrutakirti Prabhu in Los Angeles, was fanning Srila Prabhupada with a chamara. And Prabhupada looked at him because there was a fly buzzing around his head. And he was doing all kinds of fancy swirls with the chamara, making very beautiful movements. And Prabhupada went like this, shooing away the fly, and spoke to his secretary and said, "Get someone with a brain to do this." He said, "This is for, shooing away the insects." And so he felt very bad. Another devotee came and pursued the fly, and the fly went away. So the more we see the offering of every one of these articles as an offering to the Lord, and the more we meditate on the movement and the offering and the desire to please the Lord by this service, then we become very, very close to the deity, very, very close, and so close, just like we see how Jagannath reciprocates with his devotees, how Shakshi Gopal reciprocated with his devotee, and how um, uh, Gopal, Natji, how he reciprocated with Madhavendra Puri and so many devotees, how Sanatana Goswami's Madan Mohan deity reciprocated with him. But even in our ISKCON movement, any pujari who has been a pujari for a long time feels that reciprocation. And in many cases, one of the most famous ones uh, was in Mayapur many years ago. Pankajanga Jananivas Prabhu had a dream that he saw Lord Jagannath coming across the fields toward the Mayapur temple. And Lord Jagannath said, "Please, please feed me." He couldn't understand his dream. So he got up in the morning, he went to his twin brother, Pankajangri Prabhu, and he started to speak, and they both had the same dream, that the Jagannath was coming. And then they knew that there was a Jagannath temple. So they decided, well, let's go see Lord Jagannath. They went to the Jagannath temple, and the pujari there spoke to them, and he said, "I'm very old. I have no money. Hardly anyone comes to this temple. I cannot keep up the deity. I want to donate my temple. I want to donate this temple and the deities to ISKCON." And so, of course, then they proceeded, and now that is our Jagannath Mandir. So many wonderful even sometimes when we make a mistake, if we have devotion to the deity. One pujari in Los Angeles, he was he was doing the went in, did made the offering, came out, and then he heard this huge noise, clanging metal, metal bouncing against metal type noise, and he didn't know what happened, so he ran to the altar, and he saw the plates were on the floor. So he thought, oh, did some animal enter here? Here did some. So he looked around, maybe some cat or something. No, no animal. So he went in, picked everything up, cleaned everything off, and then um, so he decided that let me try something. And he discovered that someone had put salt instead of sugar in the sweet rice. So the deities threw the plates off the altar. So, of course, this may not happen every day to everyone in every temple, but the fact that these things have happened in so many places and so many pujaris that I've spoken to, one of the most interesting pujaris was Nayana Das Babaji, who was the pujari at uh, Champakahatta temple, which is in near Mayapur in Navadvip, in the Navadvip area, and I think he lived to be like 90, 90 some years old. But when I met him and when I knew him for some time, he told me that he had been worshiping that deity for over 70 years alone. So practically, sometimes he would have a little help, but most of the time it was just him worshiping the deity since he was like 16 years old until that time when I met him. Over 70 years, every day, worshiping the deity. No stuff. Sometimes we complain, oh, I have too much service. No, I can't make the offering. I have this, I have that. But just look at the dedication of such devotees, who give their lives for worshiping the deity. And so the main point is that we should be so grateful that the deity has made his appearance, his or her appearance, in this case, Radha Krishna, Shri Radha Gopinath. They make their appearance so that we can understand, so that we can enter deeper and deeper into pure devotional service. Because worshiping the deity engages us in pure devotional service. Our life becomes completely structured around the deity, just like a grihastha is called um, adhikari. So and so adhikari means that I have some rights, I have some privileges, I have some. Uh, but when you are a servant of the deity, you are a servant of the Lord, and you're under His schedule. I had a brief time in my life also when I was worshiping the deity. Uh, Actually, I was I was only first initiated, but the pujari got sick and the other pujari left, so I had to worship the deity for like almost a month. Every artik, every had to cook every offering and do every artik, and it was very blissful. It was very demanding, but very blissful. Of course, I wasn't ready for it. I was more in the mood of doing Sankirtan, but it was very special. So we should always remember this wonderful privilege we have that the Lord has come to give His darshan, and therefore, as much as we can possibly go and see the Lord, or if the Lord is in our house, we should have Him in a very sanctified place so that we can come and worship Him. Srila Prabhupada, especially in the beginning of the movement, would regularly worship the deities and do artik for the deities and dedicate himself to serving the deities. So this it's such a wonderful opportunity. There's no one beyond the Vaishnavas, because non-Vaishnavas in India or in Trinidad, or they have deities, but the love for the deity is not there. I remember one man in Vrindavan, I was in the Radha Gokulananda temple, and I was just chanting in front of the deity, and he came and he asked me, "Why are you not chanting in your temple?" I thought he was like somebody going to give me a hard time, saying that our temple was something less. I said, "Well, I came here because Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur was here, and and he said, no, no, your deity is the real deity. He said, your deity is so beautiful. Every day, such beautiful big garlands, such beautiful dress, so much care, so much devotion. I can understand why you're here. This deity is not being properly taken care of. No. And I said, well, uh, then let us take care of the deity. So I convinced him to give a donation. I gave a little donation. He gave a donation. And I said, if we both do this every day, then the deity will be properly taken care of, hopefully. So anyway, those are some thoughts I had about deity installation, deity worship. Uh, these are wonderful opportunities. I've been in several deity installations, especially the deity installation of Panchatattva in Mayapur, um, many different installations in different parts of the world, in Trinidad, in uh, so many places. And it's just such a great opportunity to advance. But the installation is the easy part. That's the big festival, uh, Abhishek, wonderful, beautiful activity. But the real challenge is that every day we should come and worship the deity. So I beg all of those who have some uh, designated service with the deity, please always be very careful to fulfill your duty and your responsibility and encourage others to do so. Well, and uh, try to do that service, understanding that this is my training to serve the Lord of Goloka. And if I do it properly, that Lord of Goloka will bring me to his transcendental abode and allow me to be his eternal servitor. So that's the whole purpose of permanent deity worship, that it should be done permanent so that we become a permanent worshiper of the Supreme Personality of God. So thank you all very much. Um, and I, I, I think our time is pretty much up. I think you have Artik now. So I'll stay for a few minutes, although I have another class coming up soon. But I'd like to, on this day, get the darshan. Hare Krishna. Shri Shri Radha Gopinath ki, Sri Sri Gaur Nitai ki, Nitai Gaur Pemanandi, Hari Hari Bol. Antakoti Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai.
Yeah.